All right, so first of all, welcome to everyone, and thank you for showing your interest into UMBC. So this webinar is specially designed to give you more information on postgraduate work opportunities and H-1B visa options available for the students in USA. And today we have got two special guests from UMBC. We have got Michelle Messay, and she's Assistant Director of International Student Services in UMBC. And we have got Mr. Paul. So Paul is Manager International Student Recruitment and Partnership. So first, before I hand over to these guys, I just want to tell you a few things here, how this are gonna work. So in the handouts, if you all click on the handout column, you can download the PPT which we are going to run here. And if you guys have any questions, in the question tab, you can input your questions, and in the end of this session, we will be very pleased to answer all your questions. And you can also type your question in the chat session as well. And with this, I'll go back to our first presenter panelist, to Michelle Messay. So she's gonna take you through a couple of slides, and she's gonna give you more and more information regarding UMBC career opportunities and what sort of jobs UMBC graduates get once they finish their study in UMBC. So let me let me give control to the Michelle. All right, so Michelle, over to you, so you can start.
Sure, thank you so much, Pankaj. Can everyone see the slides so far?
Yep, I can see.
Wonderful. Well, hello to everyone who's with us today, and thank you so much for joining us. As Pankaj said, my name is Michelle Massey, and I'm the Assistant Director of International Student Services here at UMBC. I'm with you from Baltimore, and it's a bright, sunny morning here. I'm going to also just let you see Paul here as well. Paul, do you want to say hi?
Hey everyone, currently speaking to you from Jakarta, Indonesia. So hello, and I'll talk more later.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so just to get us started here, here's a few quick statistics on how UMBC students are doing after their graduation last year. So you can see here the overall average salary for graduate degree holders from UMBC, and also that salary more specifically for engineering and IT grads. So we're very proud of our graduates and proud to share those statistics to show that, our students are doing very well. Here are just a few examples of some of the companies that our students have gone on to work for, such as Microsoft, NASA, IBM, Amazon, Under Armour, and these are just a few, obviously, of the many, many companies that our students go on to work for after they graduate. Of our graduating class last year, 90% of our graduate students were employed or pursuing a higher degree of education. Those that were working, 100% of them showed that they were in positions that were related to their career goals. So they're not just taking jobs for the sake of having jobs. They're taking jobs that are meaningful to them and meet their career goals. And that 58% actually worked for a company during their time as a student at UMBC, and eventually that company did hire them as well. So let's keep going here. Top academic programs that are in high demand in the US right now are this following list here. And these are programs that are offered by UMBC at the graduate level, and they're exciting and innovative programs that we're excited to offer to help meet the demand in the US in these different areas. So I know that a big part of our conversation today is about work permissions for international students before, or I guess not before, excuse me, but during and after their time as a student at UMBC. So let me just give a quick overview here to get us started, and we're going to spend time on each of these different categories. And these different work categories are areas that my office, myself and my colleagues really specialize in, and we guide students through these processes step by step. So having said that, let me just summarize these options here. The first is CPT, which stands for Curricular Practical Training. And one thing you'll find related to immigration in the US is that we use a lot of acronyms. So something like CPT, so we don't have to say Curricular Practical Training. There's a lot of acronyms, so I'll explain all of them today. So CPT is work opportunity for students while they are here, while they're studying. students can work in off-campus internships in their field. It's important to clarify this is not an opportunity to work in any job. It's specific to the student's degree of study. So there's certainly a lot of internship opportunities or short-term opportunities while students are in their degree programs that we're happy to help them take advantage of. CPT is usually part-time during the semester because the student, of course, should be enrolled full-time, and that's quite a big balance. However, over the summer, there are full-time options, and in the winter as well, when we have a break. The summer break is about 3 months long, so that's plenty of time to get some full-time work experience, and the winter break is about 1 month long. For CPT, students do find employment first, and then they go through this approval process with my office to get the work permission they need for their immigration status. We have a very robust career center on campus that does a lot of work with students in helping them find internships. For example, there are career fairs, there are resume reviews, CV reviews, there's practice interviews. We even do an international student career conference with our career center once a year. So there's a lot of different ways to help students figure out how to look for different employment opportunities. OPT is the next one. This stands for Optional Practical Training, and this is 1 year of full-time work that students can do after they graduate. This is actually an application that goes through a government agency called the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, and the process usually does take about 2 to 3 months. As I mentioned, my office works very carefully with students. We do a lot of work on OPT. We do workshops and other things to make sure students understand how this process works. We meet with each student individually to review their application before they apply as well. OPT is still part of the broader F1 visa category. So for students who are getting ready to join us this fall, you're probably in the process of getting your F1 student visa if you have not already received your visa. So that F1 visa is still the same during OPT. It is not a new status. And when you apply for OPT as you get ready to graduate, you do not need to have a job offer. OPT is very different from CPT. It's a year in which you have the opportunity to work, but you don't have to have a job first. And lastly, you've probably heard of the STEM OPT extension. So OPT is 1 year, STEM OPT is an additional 2 years. So that's a total of 3 years, 1 year regular OPT, 2 years of STEM OPT for students who qualify. So I'll talk a little bit more in detail about these categories in a moment, but that's just a nice overview to get us started. Okay, so again, just a quick summary, but we're going to add a new category here now. CPT during student studies, OPT, and if they're eligible, STEM OPT for up to 3 years after the student graduates. And then after that, most students are looking to receive H-1B, which you've probably heard of before. H-1B is a different visa category from F-1, and this is a specialized worker visa. And this is something an employer sponsors a student to work for them full-time, and this can be as long as 6 years. All right, so having introduced those categories, let's go into each one in more detail. First, we have CPT. So CPT, again, takes place while a student is in the middle of their studies. The way this works, it's approved by my office, so it does not go through a government agency, it just goes through my office here. We're doing quite a lot of these right now as our current students get ready to do summer internships, and we usually can approve these within 1 to 2 days. We recognize how important these opportunities are for our students, and we prioritize them and get them approved very quickly once we have all the requirements. You can see the different requirements here. So the student needs to have a job or an internship offer, and I've already talked a little bit about the different resources UMBC's Career Center offers to help students in that job search. The job does have to be related to the student's degree that they're studying here, and the way that we formalize that is there's a short application that the student fills out with their academic advisor. That's the advisor from their department. So for example, if it's a student in computer science, they'll have an advisor assigned to them who guides them through the computer science program the entire time they're in the program. And so that person will be very familiar with the student's progress and their program as well. They'll be from that specific department. So the student would work with their advisor to complete this application form, confirming that the job is related to their degree at UMBC. And lastly, the work experience does need to appear on the student's UMBC transcript. Usually, most students will use something called PRAC, and this is a course, but it does not have any credits, and it's free. It basically is a note that goes on the student's transcript to show that they've done a work experience. And the students are also asked to evaluate their experience and think about what they're learning in their degree, or I'm sorry, in their work experience related to their degree. So most students use that option to have their work experience appear on their transcript. So once those three things are complete, the student brings those pieces to our office and we approve their CPT for them. So that's the quick version of CPT. How about OPT? Well, OPT, again, is for after graduation, and this application does need to go through the USCIS government agency. But again, we're very eager to help students prepare their applications. As I mentioned before, we do a workshop. We do one big workshop and then smaller workshops throughout the semester to explain to students how to apply. We also have a very thorough application package that clearly explains each step about how to apply, what documents are required, what are the rules during OPT, and how to prepare for the next step after OPT. Because this application goes through the government, there is a cost. This does not go to our office. This goes to the government agency. And the cost is $410 US to apply. This application takes about 2 to 3 months, and then the student receives a work permit, and then they are free to work as they like all over the United States, any job they like, as long as it is related to their degree program. Here's a little more information about those rules. So OPT is for 1 year, and the student does have some choice as to when exactly that year takes place. I won't go into too much detail, but they have a short window of about 2 months after their graduation day, and they can choose when to start their OPT year during those 2 months. Whatever dates that year is, they are required to be employed in some fashion for up to 9 months out of the 12-month year. Any job they choose to do during OPT must be related to their degree that they've just completed at UMBC. And that work can be part-time or full-time. It can be paid or it can be voluntary. We know that most students at this stage are looking for full-time paid employment, and we're certainly happy to help with that. But sometimes students find that they start with an unpaid or a part-time position, and then they can change to a full-time position when they find the right job later on. OPT is very flexible as far as changing jobs. You don't have to just do one job. You can take one job to get started, find a better opportunity, change to that job. So it's very flexible in that way. Okay, so if the student is eligible for STEM OPT, and again, that means that their degree is classified as science, technology, engineering, or math, and we can help students know for sure if they fall into this category. There's a very objective process to know if a degree is in this category or not, so we can certainly help with that. So those who are eligible can apply to USCIS, again, the government agency. It's very similar to OPT. It's a slightly simpler application, and again, we're happy to help. Now, most students are not in Baltimore at this point. Students take jobs all over the United States, but we continue to be involved remotely in helping prepare those applications and getting the students the immigration documents that they need to apply. Just a little bit of detail here. With STEM OPT, the student does have to have an employer enrolled in what's called the E-Verify program. Again, I won't go into too much detail here, but this is something to keep in mind as students are thinking about STEM OPT as they get ready to graduate and move into OPT. E-Verify is it's a very big program in the U.S., and often large companies or companies that have a lot of international employees are already enrolled. Smaller companies might not be, but we certainly see smaller companies choosing to enroll to keep their students as well. The second requirement is that the employer has to complete a form called an I-983 training plan with the student in order to apply for STEM OPT. This training plan basically just documents who is supervising the student at their job, and that they're being evaluated and that they're getting a meaningful experience. And again, during STEM OPT, just like regular OPT, the work must be related to the student's degree of study that they completed at UMBC. Okay, so the next one, H-1B. So remember now, the H-1B is a different visa category, so this process is a little bit bigger than CPT, OPT, or STEM OPT. Because the H-1B is a specialized worker visa category, the employer has to do the immigration paperwork to file for this position for the student. The student cannot apply themselves. This is really important and very different from anything in F1 status like CPT or OPT, where the student does the immigration documentation. Now it changes to the employer. So H-1B is an annual process for the vast majority of positions in the US, and it happens once a year. So the company would file the immigration paperwork to the government agency USCIS by April 1st, or actually on April 1st specifically each year. That's the one time a year that they can apply. There's a period of time during which the government agency USCIS reviews the different applications, and those that are approved start on October 1st of the same year. Now, the April 1st to October 1st is a pretty big gap, and that's where OPT is really important. So students will usually have OPT or STEM OPT approved, and that work permission will get them through this period of time during which their H is processing. So there's not usually an interruption to the student's work permission. This is also done in the US. The student does not have to leave the US to do this process. The last bullet here is also very important. Right now, the way the H-1B process works, there's a limited number of available H-1B, and that is 85,000 per year. It's important to note here that individuals who have an advanced degree, and that means a master's or a PhD, they have 20,000 of those 85,000 just for them. So for example, if someone graduates from UMBC with a master's degree, and they have an H-1B applied for them, they first go into the special 20,000 just for advanced degree holders, and they go through a lottery system. So let me back up 1 minute and explain the lottery system. So right now, there's actually more applicants than there are available H-1Bs, and this has been the case for maybe 4 or 5 years now. And so the way that that's managed is a random lottery process. And the USCIS agency simply chooses at random which applications to review. So that's where they choose 85,000 of all of the applicants. The reason it's important to point out the advanced degree category is that students with a master's or a PhD have essentially 2 chances at the lottery. So first they go into the smaller pool, the 20,000 pool, for anyone who has an advanced degree, which is not the majority of H-1B applicants. So they have a special lottery system of their own. If they're not selected in that special lottery system, they go back into the larger pool and they have another opportunity to be selected through the lottery system. So I know that's a little confusing, but I hope that makes sense. And just to give an example of how many applications were received just this past April 1st, there were 199,000 applications received for 85,000 spots. So as you can see from these numbers, you can have an employer ready to sponsor you for H-1B and do all the paperwork and everything, but it's possible to not be selected through the lottery system. This is where having 3 years of OPT and STEM OPT is really beneficial. If someone has OPT and STEM OPT, that's 3 years. So each of those 3 years, the employer can be trying for an H-1B for that person. So if they're not selected in the lottery the first year, they still have 2 more years to try. So that's a nice benefit with F1 status as well, is having up to 3 years that you can try for this process. Okay, and I know that certainly, I imagine everyone's familiar with rumors about the future of the H-1B program since we've had our change in presidential administration. I know you're probably aware there was recently an order from our new president to review the H-1B program. It's important to point out here there's a lot of rumors. There are no formal changes to the H-1B program right now, and there are none that are planned right now. The executive order that I mentioned was simply the president telling the different government agencies and their leaders to look at the H-1B program. Some of the rumored changes that we've heard about are that the H-1B program might eventually be changed to favor individuals that hold advanced degrees from the U.S. Advanced degrees would be master's or PhD degrees from the U.S. Again, these are only rumors. Nothing has changed, and no proposals have been put forth to make any changes. There's other rumors that finding a solution to the lottery system is a priority, which would be nice because it's very stressful sometimes for students, especially if they don't have any more OPT time or if they're not eligible for STEM OPT because they do not hold a STEM degree. It's very stressful to wait and try to find out, will my H be selected in the lottery? Will it not be selected? So removing the lottery system would certainly remove a lot of anxiety. A big priority is making sure that the H-1B program is not victim to fraud. And mostly what this is talking about is that part of the H-1B petition or the application process that the employer does is to make sure or to prove that the employee that they're sponsoring for H-1B makes a comparable salary to their American workers and the average salary for that geographical area. This is important because, of course, with currency conversions, sometimes an international individual might be willing to do the same job for less money, but that hurts American workers who are then disfavored as they compete for these jobs as well. So it's important in the H-1B process to make sure that the international employee is making a competitive salary, which is also only fair. That person should be making a competitive salary. That's a big part of the process, and there is some fraud involved in this process right now that the government is trying to target and make sure that international individuals are not inappropriately being paid less than they should be receiving. So these are some of the rumors that we've heard. Again, I want to stress there is absolutely no formal changes taking place, and there are no proposed changes that are even being considered right now. To change a visa category, should there be proposals in the future, will take at least 8 months to 1 year. It would need to go through the entire lawmaking process. So I know some of you may have heard about the for example, the travel changes that the president was able to do very quickly. Of course, none of those are being enforced right now either. But it was a little scary to think that the president could quickly make big changes like that. So I want to make it very clear, when we're talking about a visa category like H-1B, this is something that is approved and managed by the bigger lawmaking bodies, and the president cannot change these things by himself. As we've seen, he can say, hey, lawmakers, I'd like you to think about this, but he cannot actually make any changes. The lawmaking process in the U.S. is a long, thorough process that requires a time for public comment when anyone in the United States can share their questions and their concerns about any proposed changes. All of those have to be addressed, and all of those have to be debated. So again, this is a lengthy process, and the fastest that this could possibly happen would be 8 months to a year. So should any changes be coming later on, we would all have a lot of time to understand what those changes could be and how to respond to those changes. And again, a lot of the rumors are actually positive changes, such as favoring individuals with advanced degrees. Okay, so at this point, we've talked through all the different work options, and I'd like to change it over, or give Paul a chance to talk a little bit about next steps to enroll in UMBC for the fall semester coming up here. Paul, would you like to take over?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. I can actually, would you mind going ahead and flipping through the slides, or do I have control now?
No, I'll move them for you, no problem.
Awesome, thank you very much. So I just wanted to briefly restate myself and introduce myself again for everybody. My name is Paul Vengus. I am manager for international recruitment and University of Maryland, Baltimore County. So some of you either through email or in person. And if you haven't received an email yet from me, you most likely will within the next couple of days, 2 weeks, regarding various things. So what I want to go over right now are just a few of the next important steps for enrollment. Most of you have already received, I think all of you have already received decisions from your department and some sort of communication regarding the next steps. But in general, the big part of your of the next step is going to be applying for an I-20. So if you haven't already done so, a big part of that would be just gathering your financial documents and submitting them to Michelle's team to go ahead and get that started. So the documents, just to briefly list them, they're pretty straightforward. It's just going to be a copy of your passport, a bank statement showing the amount reflected on the website. So it'll be 1 year of tuition and fees, as well as an estimate of other expenses. And again, that is an estimate, so it may or may not reflect the exact amount that you are going to be spending, but it is an estimate of your total cost of 1 year at UMBC as a graduate student. So then the third and final piece of that I-20 application is going to be an affidavit of support, depending on whether or not the financial document that you submitted is representative of an account that you are actually holding. So if it's your account or if it's your funds and they're coming directly from you, then you wouldn't need that. But in most cases, it would be coming from a parent or a family member, and in that case, you would need that additional affidavit of support to go with your I-20 application. Once we receive those, or once Michelle and her team receive those documents, they'll go ahead and begin processing the I-20, and then within a few days, you should receive, depending on processing times and how fast the team are going. The timeline can vary, but you will receive an email with the electronic copy and also instructions on how to apply for a hard copy of your I-20 as well. At that point, you are able to set an interview for your visa, and so you can go ahead and do that. But you'll go ahead and order the hard copy of your I-20 as soon as possible with the instructions in the email, so that you have that for your visa interview when you go. Next will be attending the visa appointment, you guys, I encourage you to contact your local representative or agent or EDUCO representative to inform them of the date, so that we can keep track of that. And then finally, the registration date is going to be June 1st for all programs. And prior to that date, you should be receiving some sort of communication from your department pertaining to course registration, and I will also be sending out an email to several of you regarding course registration. So in anticipation for registration, there are a few bullet points here on this slide regarding setting up your MyUMBC account, which most of you will likely have already done. In addition to contacting your department or your program, with any questions you might have about registering for courses, which courses you need to register for, and any additional information that you want to know specifically about your program. Finally, registering for orientation, which if you open up the handout in the PPT, there's a link, and you can go to that web page and get more information about that. As well as a link for information about class registration, and finally paying your tuition.
Can I interrupt you 1 second, Paul?
Yeah, sure.
This is Michelle, sorry. Paul mentioned registering for orientation, which is the graduate school's orientation. Your department also might have an orientation. They should let you know if they do, and it's usually after the graduate school's orientation. And in an email from our office, you would also have been invited to what we call the International Rules and Policy meeting, which is essentially another orientation, but the words get confusing when they all have the same name. So there's a couple different ways to help you get settled in your first couple weeks at UMBC. The graduate orientation is usually the earliest program, and then in the time between that program and the semester beginning, my office also does what we call the International Academy, which is a series of events and workshops to help you get settled at UMBC. We talk about everything from how to look for on-campus jobs and build your resume to fun trips. We go to Baltimore's Inner Harbor, which is a really pretty area right on the water. There's a lot of important U.S. history there that we can all enjoy together. We go swing dancing, which is a fun American social dancing tradition. We do a lot of fun stuff, so I hope that you'll consider joining us. A lot of students enjoy arriving a few weeks early to have time to get settled, get adjusted to the time, to the new food, you know, figure out where everything is and have some fun before school gets started too.
All right. So I'm going to just continue on top of that. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Sure.
So as Michelle mentioned, the international orientation is in addition to the graduate orientation. And on the next slide, I've actually listed dates. But first, I'll go ahead and finish off on the next steps for enrollment. So number 5 here talks about services that we do offer at UMBC. One of the important steps of coming to the U.S. as an international student is going to be to complete your UHS immunization form, which again, there's a link to that in the handout PowerPoint presentation, as well as the questionnaires that coincide there. So that's going to be basically if you just to make sure that you've had all of your immunizations and that they're up to date. And then also a questionnaire that gets completed by a physician in your home country. Completing the academic integrity tutorial as well, and a lot of that information will also be covered by Michelle's team during the International Academy as well. And then finally, obtaining your campus ID card, which is basically your student ID. It provides you access to basically every resource on campus, from the recreation center to the library to building access. So that will be the final step. And also, as listed here, access to buses as well, and several other resources. And then finally, attending the orientations. And I believe we've listed a few of the important dates on the next slide. So right, I mentioned registration is June 1st, and that will be online. New student orientation is going to be August 17th. A lot of students have told me that they're going to be arriving around the first week of August, first and second week of August. And Michelle, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, that students can arrive up to 30 days prior to the date that's listed on their I-20.
That's exactly right, Paul. And most people's I-20 should start on August 30th, unless you have some kind of graduate assistantship position that requires you to start earlier.
Perfect. So, right, then that would give you guys ample time to get settled, find a roommate if you're living off campus, and just in general get used to the area and get settled in, learn the transportation. So I do recommend, you know, from my own experience, arriving a few weeks early. And attending the orientation, which obviously will give you a chance to meet some people on campus, stop in and talk to your professors, and meet your advisors as well. International student orientation, which is, as Michelle just mentioned, takes place August 29th to 30th. So, and she was speaking in detail about what that entails. There is also, I believe, a separate event that's specifically for filling out all of the paperwork and forms on the second day. Is that correct, Michelle?
Yeah, that's actually the 29th. So that's what we call the paperwork party. So we just, it's a time where we can check everyone's documents and make sure everything looks good, but we also make it fun, no worries. And then on Tuesday the 30th will be the International Rules and Policy meeting, which is where we cover all the different immigration information, including a refresher of the information on CPT and OPT, for example, to make sure everyone understands the different rules related to F1 status. But like I mentioned, don't forget, before that, between the 17th and the 29th, we have a lot of fun optional events. We'll be emailing everyone a calendar next month with all the different options that we'll be offering.
Awesome. And then finally, starting classes for most of you on the 30th. But for a lot of you, you know, the first week of classes may involve some course changes, which is perfectly normal. You know, if you're meeting with your advisors and they recommend that you add additional classes or change some of your classes, we do have that flexibility in the first week before what we refer to as the drop add date. So a few very important dates listed here. In addition, as we mentioned, Michelle and I will both be communicating with you via email about a lot of these things over the next few weeks. So please keep an eye out for those emails and that communication. That's basically all I have. So if you guys want to go ahead and start listing your questions in the chat, and we can save some time to go ahead and respond.
Thank you so much, Paul. And while folks are thinking of questions and typing those in, I just wanted to briefly mention for students who are from India, I know we have students from all over the world with us right now, but specifically for students from India, there's a really strong student organization on campus called EKTA, E-K-T-A, the Indian Graduate Student Association. And if you are coming from India, I would encourage you to reach out to this group. Usually they network on Facebook. And they do a lot of work with helping incoming students find housing, setting up roommates to live together, airport pickups. They do a lot of really wonderful services for new students. So I would encourage you to look for them on Facebook, UMBC EKTA, the Indian Graduate Student Association. And if you can't find them, just give me an email and I'll connect you to their current president.
All right, so thanks, Michelle and Paul. That is a lot of information, and this information is very helpful for all the attendees. Now it's time to take some questions. So so let's go to the question tab now. So there is a first question in regards to CPT. So the question is like, CPT need work experience, and if someone is not having work experience, does that mean they can't apply for CPT?
Sure, that's a great question. So CPT is for a job that the student has already found. So for CPT, you do need to have a job before we can approve it. CPT is permission to work in a specific position, so there's no way to approve it ahead of time. So again, the first step for a new student would be to take advantage of the Career Center on campus. And the Career Center is very familiar with kind of the average annual cycle. So for example, if a student is starting in the fall semester, that means they will be eligible for CPT the following summer. And again, I didn't want to go into a lot of detail. I'm happy to go into as much detail as you like. But on the slide I didn't mention, CPT requires that a student be enrolled for 2 semesters full-time before they become eligible to use that work permission. So someone starting in the fall would enroll full-time fall and spring, and then in the summer they would be eligible to use CPT. So the Career Center does all kinds of events to help students look for internships as early as January and even December. They have an internship fair where they bring different companies on campus who are eager to hire students for summer internship positions, and students can go to that. They can get their resume reviewed ahead of time by the Career Center. They do sessions on how to network, how to use LinkedIn, how to get references, all kinds of things to help students prepare for that job search. So that hopefully, if they take advantage of those resources, a student should be able to find a position they're excited about for the summer. And once they get that position, or ideally, if they get lots of positions and they have to choose one, they would need to decide which one they want to take. And after they decide, that's when we do CPT to approve them to work in that specific position. Just as an example, I just had an an Indian computer science master student stop in yesterday, and he actually had 5 different summer internship offers, and he had just picked one. So we just finished his CPT yesterday.
All right, so thanks, Michelle. That's great information. So let's move to next question. So there is one question. Are we having Korean student organizations in UMBC?
That's a great question. I'm almost positive there is. I don't know that there's one specific to graduate students, though. I believe it's a broader organization that's including undergraduate and graduate students. And to be very honest, you'll probably find that there's a lot of what we would call second generation Korean students in that club as well. And that means students who are Korean but have lived a long time in the US. Because of our location close to Washington, D.C., there's a lot of international families who have had children that have lived here since they were pretty young. So there's quite a few Koreans in that category as well. Close to campus here, there's a thriving Korean American community nearby. So I think you'll find a lot of people both coming from abroad as well as Korean families who've lived here for some time.
All right, thank you. So next question is there any visa interview tips for the students?
Sure. Visa interview tips, the best thing I can tell you is to be honest and straightforward. What the visa officer is trying to do is look at all your different documents and hear what you have to say, and they want to see that all the information matches. So if you have an I-20 for a degree in computer science, for example, and they ask you, oh, what do you want to study? And you say computer science. Well, of course, that's a step in the right direction. They might ask you why you chose UMBC. So you want to be prepared to answer that. Hopefully you already know that, so it shouldn't be hard to answer since you have made the decision to attend UMBC. So really it's just about being honest, explaining what you want to do. At the same time, keep in mind that a student visa is what is called a non-immigrant visa. And that means that the officer interviewing you expects that you do not intend to stay in the U.S. long term. So I know for some people, you might want to stay in the U.S. long term, first with a student visa and then maybe later on with an H-1B and eventually permanent residency. You can certainly have those plans, but right now you're just talking about your student visa. And because that is a category that is non-immigrant, they're looking for proof that you intend to go home after you get your degree, excuse me, and some related work experience, which is considered to be a continuation of your degree as you get that experience here in the States. Excuse me. So keep that in mind, and while you're certainly welcome to talk about your plans, I wouldn't recommend stressing any interest that you have in staying in the U.S. long term. Just focus on your academic goals because you're applying for a student visa. So answer the questions from the perspective of being a student. What do you want to study? Why do you want to study that? Why do you want to study that at UMBC? Those are the kinds of questions that are really common.
All right, great, thank you. So the next question is, does the term of the insurance start after the college start? In that case, does student need to buy immediate insurance to cover till the time the insurance starts?
Sure, that's a great question. The UMBC health insurance plan starts in mid-August. The dates change a little every year, but it's usually around August 5th. Every international student will be automatically enrolled in UMBC's health insurance plan. So that will be covered starting in mid-August. That's a good question. Before mid-August, the student should probably have some kind of their own insurance, but hopefully any insurance you have from home might cover a short trip. So just as if you're coming, for example, on August 1st, and your UMBC insurance takes effect on August 15th, maybe your existing insurance from home might cover, those 2 weeks just as a trip or something like that.
All right, thank you. So the next question is, are graduate assistantships decided or awarded by the department?
Yes, great question. Yes, almost always departments are the final decision makers. Each department has their own funding. Well, hopefully they have, some of them have quite a bit of funding because of different grants that the different professors are working with, for example. So each different department will have different amounts of funding that they have to offer in the form of graduate assistantships. So some departments have the ability to offer quite a few, and some departments cannot offer any. So it really changes depending on your department. Now, you'll find that once you're here and once you become a student here, you might hear of some other opportunities that are not related to your department. These are very rare, and it's really unusual to find them before you get started here. But once you've been here for a little while, you might see some other opportunities arise. An example of that is our Graduate Student Association. And this is the formal student government body for graduate students. And new board members are elected every year. So, for example, the president, the vice president. There's about 5 or 6 positions that are elected each year, and those are graduate assistantship positions. So they do include an annual stipend, tuition remission, and health insurance if you are elected to one of those positions. Now, obviously, you cannot be elected to one of those positions before you even set foot on campus. So that's an example of something that you might find if getting involved in that way is exciting to you after you've been here for a little while.
All right, thank you. So next question is, can I get the recording of this session? The answer is yes. Now we'll move to next question. Okay, can we mention about plans to work on OPT period during our visa interview?
Oh, sure. OPT is part of F1 status, so that's perfectly fine. Remember, OPT stands for Optional Practical Training, and it's important to think about this. So practical training means learning, right? You're still learning. You're just learning in a practical sense, which means you're learning by doing. You're learning by working in that position. And that's why it's okay if it's unpaid or if it's part-time. The goal is to get experience actually using the skills that you've been learning about in the classroom. So it's perfectly fine to talk about OPT as a means of getting experience in your field. I would not stress any interest in using OPT to find an H-1B employer, for example, because again, now you're not talking about academic goals. Now you're talking about work goals. And the student visa, the purpose is, I mean, of course, there's a lot of ways to get work experience, but that's not what the purpose is intended to be. So again, just keep any answers academic in nature. You're certainly welcome to say that you're interested in OPT or STEM OPT, but that would be best framed from the perspective of getting experience in your field, not as a means to staying longer in the US.
All right, thank you. So the next question is, are on-campus jobs available for graduate students? If so, what sort of jobs are available?
Oh, that's a great question. On-campus jobs are available, but it's important to realize that they're competitive because a lot of people want to work on campus and make extra money. And not just international students, but all students are eager to have those opportunities. So what our experience has been is that typically students are a little surprised that it takes a lot of work to find an on-campus job. It's the process of finding a job goes a lot more smoothly when students work with our Career Center. The Career Center recognizes that this is something new students are very interested in. So we have a workshop on how to find on-campus jobs and how to prepare your resume in mid-August, usually after the graduate orientation. So probably somewhere like August 20th or 21st, something like that. So the Career Center will help you make sure your resume is ready, and they will give you some ideas about how to look for those jobs. The process of looking for those jobs in the US, I think, is quite a bit different than in other countries. So offices on campus will get very frustrated if students just show up and say, I want a job, or give me a job now. So it's really a different process where the students should actually be interested in the job and not just looking for any job at all. And the potential employer wants to hear about how the student has job skills that apply to this job, or has skill sets in general, even if they haven't had any work experience. So sometimes students do find jobs right away, and sometimes students find that it takes a semester and they find something in their second semester. Another great way to find on-campus jobs is networking. So as an example, this past fall, we have a Starbucks cafe on campus, and they were hiring a lot of students. And 1 or 2 of our new international students found that out, and they applied and they were hired. And then they told a lot of their friends. And so now probably about 20 or 30 international students who were new last fall all work there. So some of the common jobs that we see students getting early in their time at UMBC are food service related. So jobs in the UMBC dining hall or in the different food vendors on campus. I mentioned the cafe as well. Other jobs, sometimes students are able to find jobs that utilize their skill sets a little bit better. So some students do IT jobs on campus with our IT office, for example, if they have that skill set. Students love to work in the library. It's a very pleasant place to work, but a lot of people know that, so those jobs are competitive. So again, I hope I'm being clear that there are a lot of opportunities, but it's important to recognize that it's not something where you can expect there to be jobs waiting for you when you show up. There is some work involved in finding a job, but most students who want an on-campus job find that they are able to find a job in the first semester or sometimes in the second semester.
All right, great. So the next question is again related to GA, which is graduate assistantship and teaching assistantship. And the guys also want to know the various duties under teaching assistantships.
Oh, that's a good question, and that's going to vary tremendously by the different departments. So if you asked about a teaching assistantship, some examples of common duties, which may or may not be the duties in a specific job, might be a TA. Usually a TA is not actually teaching a class. There's a few exceptions for beginner level language classes, such as teaching Chinese 100, which is that like beginner Chinese or something like that. But for most classes that a student would have a TA, they would be helping with the class. They might be grading assignments. They might be running study sessions. They might be running discussion groups. They might be overseeing lab groups if they're in an area where lab work is required, for example. So those are a few examples. But when a student is awarded a specific TA, they should be given more information about their specific duties. If this person who asked the question actually has a TA, hopefully your department has let you know about a TA orientation. So usually there's a training session, I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's usually about a week long before school starts, where you are oriented to your specific duties. You go through some different kinds of training, some expectation setting about common behavior with American students, that kind of thing.
All right, thank you. So the next question, I guess, is related to CPT again. So the question is, fall guys get chances to work in summer. So what happens to the student who starts in summer? Will they be allowed to work in spring or summer of the next year?
That's a good question. So the immigration rules require 2 full-time semesters to be completed before someone is eligible for CPT, and summer does not count as a semester. So someone can certainly start in summer and take 1 class, maybe 2 classes. If they have an assistantship, that position might require them to start over summer, but it's not what we consider a full semester. So that time over the summer does not contribute to meeting the 2 semester requirement for CPT.
All right, got it. Thank you. So the next question is related to medical checkup of the student. So is it required prior to the visa interview or before the departure of the student from his home country?
Sure. So the requirement is a form completed with the student's physician from home, and that actually has to be submitted to UMBC before the student tries to register for their second semester. So the deadline's quite a bit later than either of the examples that were in the question. It is not required for the visa interview. It is not required to register for your first semester. It is required to be done during your first semester and preferred to be done before you actually get started. Now, if anyone happens to be living on UMBC's campus, the rules are a little bit stricter, and that form does need to be completed before you move into your room on campus here. But if you're living off campus, the deadline is to have it submitted before you register for your second semester. We'll talk about this at the international orientation some more, but it is important to note if you forget to do that form, or for some reason just don't do it, you will be blocked from registering for your second semester of courses. So it is important to remember to do it. Now, mostly it's just having your doctor fill out the form. It's certainly a lot easier if you have a doctor at home to have them fill out the form with you, because they already know all of that information about you. Now, if that's not something you can do at home, that's okay. You can do it with the doctor here once you arrive, but just keep in mind that doctor doesn't really know you yet, so it will take them a while to get all of that information. And if they don't have a doctor's signature that you've been given different vaccinations, then they would ask you to do those vaccinations again once you arrive here. Regardless, everyone will take one vaccination when they get here, and I believe it's a, I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I don't remember. I think it might be a tetanus shot. So everyone will need to do that when you arrive in the U.S. But again, you can do that with our health services office, and it is covered by your health insurance that you'll have with UMBC.
All right, got it. Thank you. So the next question is, how many days before the orientation student can land in USA?
So a student can arrive up to 30 days from their I-20 start date. So that's a little different. It's not related to the orientation date. It's this start date on your I-20. For most people coming in fall, that would be August 30th. That's your I-20 start date. If you have a graduate assistantship or TA and RA, something like that, check your I-20. Your date is probably a little bit earlier because that department probably requested you to start before the beginning of the semester, usually in like mid-August. So whatever start date is on your I-20, you can arrive 30 days before that day. So for most people, that would be the very end of July, would be the earliest you can arrive.
All right, thank you. So next question is, how safe is Baltimore?
Oh, that's a great question. So I am from Baltimore. I've lived here my whole life. I've lived in Baltimore City, and I've also lived outside of Baltimore City. So Baltimore is fine. There are, like any city, if you're going into the city itself, of course there are some neighborhoods that you probably just don't want to hang out in, and you probably don't really have a reason to be there anyway. There's other neighborhoods in Baltimore that are really nice. There's a lot of wonderful food options. If anyone is into art, culture, music, Baltimore has a really vibrant and thriving arts and culture scene. There's a lot of really wonderful things to do here. It's also worth noting that UMBC is not located in Baltimore City. We are about a 10-minute drive on the highway south of Baltimore City. So the campus here is actually very green. It's very suburban. Campus is largely pedestrian. There's not a lot of ways for people to drive through the campus. And the campus here is incredibly safe. It's very, very safe. The area that we're situated in is also very safe. Students living off campus tend to live very close to campus for the convenience of transitioning or commuting back and forth. And they also find that the area is fine and they feel very comfortable in their living areas. I hope that answers the question, but I'm happy to go into more detail. But I know sometimes Baltimore has a bad reputation, largely from one TV show from the 90s called The Wire. But I love it here. It's a wonderful place to live. I'm raising my family here, and I really think it's a really interesting and fun place to be.
And Michelle, just to add a little bit to that as well. A lot we'll find that, and students will find as well, and I've noticed since living in the area, is that a lot of obviously there are a lot of really great schools, other than UMBC in the area as well, like Johns Hopkins, for example, and a lot of the faculty and the staff from those schools will choose to live in the area that UMBC is situated in, the town of Catonsville. So if that can give you an idea of the area and the type of people in the area as well. I think that that might help a little bit to paint the picture.
Yeah, that's a great point, Paul. Thank you. Catonsville, the town that UMBC is actually in, was named by Money Magazine a couple of years ago as one of the best non-city places to live, because it's just so convenient to Baltimore City and to public transportation down to Washington, D.C., but it's a very charming and beautiful and safe place to live.
All right, so thank you, Michelle, Paul, and everyone who has attended this session. So this is really a lot of information. So we need to wrap up here, and there are a lot of questions which are still unattended. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna come back to you through email with the answers of all your questions. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much for organizing as well, and we look forward to meeting everybody in the fall.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you to everybody.
Bye-bye. All right, bye-bye.